Low, intense whisper. What would you do if money whispered your name in the darkness? Not metaphorically, literally called to you when no one else could hear. Pause, then more urgent. The bills felt warm in my hands, alive. They knew my deepest desires, my darkest thoughts. Each time I spent them, something wonderful happened, but something inside me died, voice breaking slightly. When I finally gathered the courage to burn it all, the flames turned blue. And then I heard it. My name screamed from the fire in a voice that knew me better than my own mother, direct, intense. They say wealth comes with a price, but no one tells you the price might be your soul. This isn't just a story. This is my warning, whispered. Listen closely. The money is still out there, and it might be looking for you next. Morgan Reeves stood motionless at his late uncle's desk, staring at the weathered wooden box before him. The lawyer had departed moments ago, leaving behind cryptic words about an inheritance best kept private. The afternoon sunlight filtered through dusty blinds, casting long shadows across the study that smelled of old books and something indefinable, something Morgan couldn't quite place. He traced his fingers along the intricate carvings on the box's surface, symbols he didn't recognize, patterns that seemed to shift when observed too long. Inside his chest, a peculiar sensation grew. Anticipation mingled with unease. "Just open it," he whispered to himself. His voice oddly loud in the empty house. Uncle Terence had always been the eccentric one in the family, the reclusive academic who traveled to places no one had heard of, who spoke of ancient customs and forgotten rituals at holiday gatherings until everyone found reasons to refresh their drinks. Morgan had been the only one who listened, fascinated by tales of cultures where wealth and doom were considered intimate companions. The brass latch yielded with a soft click. Inside, stacks of bills, old bills, filled the container to its brim. Morgan's breath caught. Not a fortune perhaps, but substantial. Enough to erase his mounting debts. Enough to offer breathing room after months of suffocation. As he lifted the first stack, a folded piece of yellowed paper fell to the desk. His uncle's familiar cramped handwriting crawled across the page. "To whomever inherits this burden, for it is a burden, not a blessing. The money answers to itself. It demands to be spent, but extracts its own price. I've carried it too long. Perhaps you'll find the strength I lacked. Perhaps you'll succeed where I failed." And T. Morgan laughed softly, shaking his head. "Dramatic to the end, weren't you?" He set the note aside, attention returning to the cash. As he counted, he noticed oddities. The bills were old but pristine, the serial numbers sequential, the ink unusually vibrant for their apparent age. That night, he dreamed of currents, not of water but of hands. Thousands of hands passing the same bills from person to person, a human river spanning centuries. He woke with his heart pounding and the distinct impression that something in the house was watching him. "It's just money," Morgan told his reflection the next morning, dark circles beneath his eyes. "Just paper with a signed value." But as he spoke, he found himself wanting to touch it again, to count it, to feel its weight in his hands. For the first time in months, he paid his overdue rent and utilities without the familiar knot of anxiety. The relief was immediate and intoxicating. Yet as the cashier took the bills, Morgan thought he saw her fingers twitch, as if the paper had momentarily vibrated against her skin. "Is something wrong with these?" she asked, examining a $100 bill more closely. "No," Morgan replied too quickly. "They're just from an old collection. Family inheritance." As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the money had recognized its new owner, that somewhere in his uncle's house the remaining stacks were waiting for his return. 2 weeks after discovering the inheritance, Morgan noticed the changes. Subtle at first, a streak of unusual luck, doors opening that had previously remained firmly shut. A promotion at work, a call from an old flame. The barista who suddenly remembered his complicated order. The money seemed to hum with potential in its wooden box beneath his bed. Each time he spent a bill, positive outcomes followed. Morgan began carrying one in his wallet at all times, a talisman of sorts, though he would never have described it that way aloud. "You seem different," observed his sister Claire during their monthly lunch. Her eyes, so similar to his own, studied him with the scrutinizing gaze that had intimidated him since childhood. Morgan shrugged, signaling the waiter for the check. "Just getting my life together finally." "No, it's something else." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You look, I don't know, hungry." He laughed, but the sound rang hollow even to his ears. Later, alone in his apartment, her words echoed. Standing before the bathroom mirror, he examined himself. His appearance hadn't changed, yet something in his eyes seemed altered, a glimmer that hadn't been there before, a sharpness. That night he dreamed of the box opening itself, bills floating upward like autumn leaves caught in a reverse current, dancing around his sleeping form before settling back into their container. He woke to find the box on his nightstand, rather than under the bed where he'd left it. "I must have moved it before sleeping," he reasoned, ignoring the cold sweat dampening his shirt. But deep down, he knew he hadn't. The following day, Morgan purchased an expensive watch he'd always wanted but never justified. The transaction brought an almost euphoric sense of satisfaction. As he handed over 3 crisp $100 bills from the inheritance, he noticed the salesman's expression change mid-smile. "So where did you say you got these?" The man held one bill to the light, examining it with sudden professional interest. "Family inheritance," Morgan replied, the phrase becoming his automatic response. "Interesting. The serial numbers—" "Well, never mind." The salesman carefully placed the bills in the register, but Morgan caught him wiping his hands on his trousers afterward, as if removing something unpleasant. That evening, examining his new watch in the fading daylight, Morgan realized he could no longer recall exactly how much money had been in the box initially. Had he spent a few thousand already, more? The numbers slipped from his mind like water through cupped hands. He decided to count it properly. But when he opened the box, what he saw made no logical sense. The stacks appeared unchanged, as full as the day he'd first opened it. Morgan frantically counted each bill, twice, then a third time. There was more money than before. He was certain of it. A text message interrupted his spiraling thoughts, a colleague inviting him to an exclusive poker game. "High stakes, influential players." "You're on a lucky streak," the message read. "Time to leverage it." Morgan stared at his phone, then back at the money. Something whispered in the back of his mind, a warning perhaps. But the voice was too faint beneath the growing roar of possibility. He selected several bills from the top stack, noticing for the first time how warm they felt against his skin, almost alive with potential, like they wanted to be spent. Morgan couldn't pinpoint exactly when he first heard it, a sound at the threshold of perception. A whisper that might have been the wind, might have been his own breathing, might have been something else entirely. It came most often at night, when he lay awake, calculating his growing wealth and the doors it continued to open. Morgan. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. Just his name, spoken with intimate familiarity. His winning streak stretched from weeks into months. The poker games, the well-timed stock purchases, the real estate investment that doubled in value overnight. Each success drew admiring glances and envious comments, feeding something within him that grew hungrier by the day. Yet his sleep deteriorated. Dark dreams plagued him, visions of previous owners, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow, passing the money forward through time. Sometimes he saw his uncle among them, watching him with pity. "You look terrible," Claire said bluntly when she visited his new penthouse apartment. Her gaze traveled over the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "All this, but at what cost?" "Don't be dramatic," Morgan replied, pouring them both drinks with hands that trembled slightly. "I'm just tired." "Work has been demanding." "What work?" Claire challenged. "You barely go to the office anymore. You don't return my calls. Mum is worried sick." Morgan felt a flash of irritation so intense it momentarily darkened his vision. "I don't need to explain myself to you or anyone. For the first time in my life, Things are going my way. This isn't you talking. Claire set down her untouched drink and moved toward the door. Whatever's happening, Morgan, whatever you're involved in, you can still walk away. After she left, he stood at the window, watching darkness fall over the city lights blinking on like earthbound stars. Something moved in his peripheral vision, a flutter of paper. He turned sharply, heart racing. Nothing, just the empty apartment. But later that night, he found bills scattered across his bed, arranged in a pattern that resembled a human form. Morgan swept them to the floor with a strangled cry, then immediately regretted his roughness, gathering each one with apologetic care. Morgan. The whisper came more distinctly now, emanating from the bills themselves. He pressed his hands over his ears, but the voice continued undeterred. "We chose you, Morgan. We've always chosen you." Sleep eluded him entirely that night. He researched obsessively instead. Ancient curses, haunted objects, myths about money that brought misfortune. His search history became increasingly erratic, desperate. At dawn, he found himself standing before his bathroom mirror, a single bill held between his fingers. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. The bill trembled slightly, though there was no draft. In the mirror, Morgan's reflection smiled back at him with an expression he didn't recognize, predatory, satisfied. For a brief, terrifying moment, he thought he saw the face on the bill turn toward him, lips moving in silent communion. He dropped the money as if burned. Where it touched the wet countertop, he could have sworn the water turned momentarily red. That afternoon, Morgan received a call from his bank. Unusual activity on his accounts. Transfers he didn't remember making. Signatures that matched his butt transactions he couldn't recall authorizing. "Sir, these don't appear to be fraudulent," the bank representative explained carefully. "The biometric data confirms it was you." Morgan ended the call, hands shaking violently now. On his kitchen counter, where he was certain he'd left nothing, sat a neat stack of bills from the inheritance. "We spend you, Morgan. Not the other way around." Winter settled over the city like a shroud. Morgan retreated further from his former life, ignoring calls, cancelling appointments. His new wealth insulated him from consequences, at least those of the ordinary world. But other consequences accumulated like snow against his doorway, impassable, unavoidable. He no longer bothered counting the money. The box remained permanently open now, often in different locations from where he'd left it. Sometimes he'd wake to find bills covering him like a blanket. Other times, they formed patterns on the floor, spirals, circles, once a perfect outline of his sleeping form. The whispers grew more insistent, a chorus now rather than a single voice. They spoke not just his name, but fragments of thoughts he hadn't shared, memories he'd never revealed. Knowledge about him no one else possessed. "We knew your grandfather too, Morgan, and his father before him. Your blood has carried us for generations." He began researching his family history, discovering disturbing patterns: suicides, institutionalizations, unexplained disappearances, and always, somewhere in the family documents, references to sudden wealth followed by catastrophe. During a rare venture outside, Morgan encountered David Chen, an anthropology professor at the local university. Their conversation, beginning casually at a cafe, took an unexpected turn when Morgan carefully raised the subject of cursed objects. "Every culture has stories of cursed wealth," Chen explained, eyes bright with academic enthusiasm. "Money that brings initial fortune but eventual ruin. The interesting common thread is that these cursed items can't simply be discarded. They return to their chosen owner." Morgan's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Chosen. The belief is that certain objects select their possessors rather than the other way around. Chen leaned forward. "In most traditions, the only way to break such a curse is to destroy the object completely, usually by fire. But even then, there's always a cost." That night, Morgan emptied the wooden box onto his living room floor. Thousands of dollars in old bills formed a small mountain. For hours, he sat cross-legged before them, watching as they occasionally shifted without touch, aligned themselves in new configurations. Why me? He finally asked aloud. Because you wanted us, came the immediate reply, so clear he glanced around, half expecting to find someone in the room with him. Because your desire called to us. Because emptiness recognizes emptiness. Morgan buried his face in his hands. The truth of it cut deep. How readily he'd accepted the money, how quickly he'd dismissed his uncle's warning, how the initial thrill of spending it had filled a void he'd never acknowledged. He reached for his phone, dialing Claire's number. It rang endlessly before going to voicemail. "Claire, I need help," he whispered. "I think I'm in trouble. Real trouble." The confession unlocked something, and words poured out about the money, the whispers, the growing certainty that he was losing not just his mind, but something more fundamental. After ending the call, Morgan gathered the bills with trembling hands, returning them to their box. For the first time in months, he slept without dreams. The next morning, Claire arrived at his door, concern etched across her face. "I got your message," she said. "Let's talk." As they sat across from each other, Morgan found the words wouldn't come. Each time he tried to explain, his throat constricted, his thoughts scattered. Claire reached across the table, taking his hand. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. You're my brother." The money box, which he'd hidden in the bedroom closet, suddenly crashed to the floor behind them. Bills exploded outward, swirling through the air with impossible momentum before settling around Claire's feet. Her eyes widened in horror. "Morgan, what? Don't touch it!" he cried, but too late. She had already reached down, lifting one of the bills. Morgan watched as something passed across her face, a shadow of the hunger he now knew intimately. For a terrible moment, he saw the curse claim another victim, branch into another life. Then Claire dropped the bill, as if scalded, her expression clearing. "We need to get rid of this," she said with unexpected clarity. "All of it. Now." "It keeps coming back," Morgan explained, pacing his living room while Claire sat rigidly on the sofa. 3 days had passed since her arrival. 3 days of increasingly desperate attempts to dispose of the money. They'd tried everything, shredding the bills, only to find them whole again the next morning, arranged in a perfect circle around Morgan's bed. Burying them in the woods outside the city, only to discover the exact amount hidden under Morgan's mattress upon their return. Even dropping them from the penthouse window into traffic below, watching in horrified fascination as a sudden gust of wind carried each bill back upward. Through the open window, settling neatly on the coffee table. "The professor was right," Claire said quietly. "It has to be destroyed completely." She hesitated. "Fire, Morgan. We have to burn it." The mere suggestion sent a jolt of panic through him, a visceral response that wasn't entirely his own. The voices, momentarily quieter in Claire's presence, surged in protest. "We cannot be unmade. We are eternal. We are part of you now." "I don't think I can," he whispered, hating the weakness in his voice. Claire stood, crossing to him with determined steps. "Listen to me. This thing, whatever it is, it's consuming you. I've watched you change day by day. Your eyes, your voice," she faltered. "Sometimes when you sleep, I don't recognize your face." Morgan turned away, unable to meet her gaze. In the weeks since finding the money, he'd avoided mirrors, uncomfortable with his own reflection. Now he wondered what Claire saw when she looked at him. What transformation was visible to others that he couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge? That evening, as Claire prepared dinner, Morgan found himself alone with the box for the first time in days. The whispers intensified immediately, seductive and familiar. "She wants to separate us. She's always been jealous of your potential, of what you could become with us." "Stop!" Morgan hissed, pressing his palms against his temples. "Think of everything we've given you, everything we still could give." Images flooded his mind, power, influence beyond what he'd already gained. Decades of prosperity, of being untouchable, of never again feeling the insecurity that had defined his earlier life. When Claire returned, she found him seated before the open box, bills spread between his fingers, expression distant. "Morgan?" she ventured cautiously. He looked up slowly, and Claire took an involuntary step backward. Maybe we're overreacting, he said, his voice oddly flat. It's just money, after all. Valuable, useful. Claire shook her head, tears forming. That's not you talking. Please, Morgan. Write this. Something in her desperation reached him, a fragment of the brother she knew surfacing briefly. His hands released the money. Help me, he whispered. That night they made preparations. Claire researched ritual burnings, sacred ceremonies for cleansing cursed objects. Morgan, moments of clarity alternating with periods of resistance, gathered supplies, a metal container, accelerant, protective gloves. We do this tomorrow, Claire declared. At dawn, supposedly the boundary between night and day offers protection. Morgan nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Not just fear of the money's return, but fear of life without it, of returning to ordinary existence, of losing what had made him special, even if that specialness came with a terrible price. As he finally drifted toward uneasy sleep, the whispers returned with renewed intensity. She cannot save you. Only we can. We are your salvation and your damnation, Morgan Reeves. We are your beginning and your ending. We have always been. In his dreams that night, Morgan saw all the previous owners of the money, dozens, perhaps hundreds, stretching back through time. Each face bore the same hungry expression, the same hollow eyes. At the end of the line stood his uncle, hand extended in warning or welcome. Morgan couldn't tell which. Is there no escape? Morgan asked in the dream. His uncle smiled sadly. There is always escape, nephew, but never without sacrifice. Dawn broke with unnatural brilliance, streaks of red and gold splitting the horizon like wounds in the sky. Morgan stood on his balcony, breathing deeply, gathering resolve for what lay ahead. Behind him, Claire arranged their materials with methodical precision. The metal container centered on heat-resistant tiles, bundles of sage and rosemary for purification, the accelerant. Matches, it's time, she said softly. The money box sat between them, its presence almost gravitational. Morgan felt physically ill at the thought of what they were about to attempt. His hands trembled as he reached for it. You will fail, the whispers assured him. Others have tried. All have failed. This time will be different, Morgan muttered, earning a concerned glance from Claire. They had chosen a location carefully, a clearing in the woods where Claire had once performed nature ceremonies with college friends. Far from buildings, isolated enough for privacy, yet open to the morning sky. They worked in silence, arranging the bills in the metal container, layering them with the herbs Claire had insisted would help. As Morgan poured the accelerant, a wind picked up, circling the clearing with unnatural precision. The trees surrounding them remained perfectly still, yet around the container, leaves and twigs spun in a miniature cyclone. "Hurry!" Claire urged, her voice tight with tension. Morgan struck a match, but it extinguished before reaching the container. A second, a third, each snuffed out by the swirling air. "It's fighting back," he said, desperation rising. Claire grabbed his hand. Together then, they knelt on opposite sides of the container. Claire began speaking words Morgan didn't recognize, an invocation in a language that sounded ancient and powerful. With each phrase, the whispering from the money grew more frantic, less coherent. Morgan, Morgan. Morgan, Morgan, no longer words, but a desperate keening. His sister's hand tightened around his as she struck another match, sheltering the flame with her body until it caught the edge of a bill. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then blue flame erupted from the container, shooting upward with impossible height. The fire didn't behave like normal fire. It didn't consume gradually, but engulfed the entire contents at once. Burning with cold intensity, the screaming began, not whispers now, full-throated, agonized screaming that echoed through the clearing. Voices upon voices layered atop one another, distant at first, then closer, as if emerging from the flames themselves. Morgan tried to pull away, but Claire held him firmly. "Don't break the circle," she commanded. "It's trying to stop us." Through the blue flames, Morgan saw faces forming and dissolving, the previous owners, he realized. Their features contorted in rage or agony, mouths open in silent protest. At the center of the fire, the bills themselves seemed to writhe like living things, and then, cutting through the cacophony of screams, a single voice spoke his name. Not whispered now, shouted with terrible clarity. His own name in the flames, pronounced with such intimate knowledge that Morgan felt stripped bare. Every secret exposed. Morgan Reeves. The sound penetrated bone and blood, reverberating through his entire being. Claire's grip on his hand became painful as the voice called his name again, using inflections only someone who truly knew him would use. The way his mother had called him as a child. The way a lover might whisper in darkness. The fire changed color, shifting from blue to a deep arterial red. The heat intensified until both siblings were forced to lean away, faces turned from the blistering temperature. "It knows me," Morgan gasped. "How does it know me like this?" Claire's face was streaked with tears, whether from the heat or emotion, he couldn't tell. "Because you let it in. Because you welcomed it." The accusation struck home with painful accuracy. He had welcomed it, had embraced the curse even as it consumed him, had fed it with his desires and ambitions. "I release you," Morgan thought suddenly, the words forming with unexpected clarity. "I release myself." Something shifted in the fire. The screaming faltered, then resumed with renewed desperation. The flames surged higher, then abruptly collapsed inward. For a suspended moment, absolute silence filled the clearing, then ash, nothing but ash in the container. Gray and ordinary and final. 3 months later, Morgan sat across from Dr. Eliza Harmon, watching spring rain trace patterns down her office window. These weekly sessions had become an anchor in his reconstructed life, a space where he could speak openly about experiences that defied rational explanation. "The dreams are less frequent now," he reported, absently touching the scar on his left palm, a perfect crescent, a souvenir from the burning where flame had kissed skin. "Maybe twice a week instead of every night." Dr. Harmon nodded, making a brief note. Unlike other professionals he'd cautiously approached, she neither dismissed his story as delusion nor insisted on medicating away his experiences. Instead, she listened with the attention of someone familiar with the boundaries between conventional reality and something else entirely. "And the whispers?" she asked. Morgan hesitated. "Gone, mostly." He shifted uncomfortably. "Sometimes, when I'm half asleep or particularly stressed, I think I hear echoes, but distant now, like memories rather than presence. After the burning, recovery had been neither immediate nor complete. The curse had left its mark, physically in his scarred hand, psychologically in the hypervigilance that made him check beneath his bed each night, spiritually in his newfound wariness of good fortune. He had returned to his modest apartment, sold most of his extravagant purchases. The penthouse, the artwork, the investments, all methodically dismantled. Some things couldn't be undone. Relationships strained to breaking. Trust shattered, then imperfectly mended. Claire had stayed with him through the worst of it, the withdrawal that followed the money's destruction. Days of fever and disorientation, nights when he'd claw at the floorboards, certain the bills were hidden underneath. The desperate bargaining, the rage, the bottomless grief for something he could neither name nor entirely regret. "I saw Uncle Terence yesterday," Morgan continued. "At the care facility." Dr. Harmon's eyebrows rose slightly. This was new information. "How was that?" "Illuminating." Morgan watched raindrops race down the glass. "He recognized me immediately, though they said he rarely recognizes anyone. We didn't talk about the money, not directly. But he knew. The visit had been Claire's suggestion, confronting the origin, closing the circle. Their uncle, diminished by stroke and dementia, had retained an unsettling clarity about certain matters. "Family curse," Terence had whispered, fingers clutching Morgan's arm with surprising strength. "Follows the longing, the emptiness." His clouded eyes had suddenly sharpened. "You burned it, didn't you? Good boy." "Good boy." In the therapist's office, Morgan continued. "He said something that stayed with me. That the money doesn't create desire, it only amplifies what's already there. That's why it chooses certain people. People with holes inside them. Do you believe that?" Dr. Harmon asked. Morgan considered the question seriously. "I think there was truth in it. The money didn't give me anything I didn't already want. It just removed all barriers, all consequences. He paused, until the real consequences arrived. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the window. Morgan found the sound soothing now, though there had been weeks after the burning when any rhythmic noise would trigger panic, reminding him of the whispering bills. "Claire's pregnant," he said suddenly. 4 months along. "She only told me last week," Dr. Harmon smiled warmly. "That's wonderful news." "It is," Morgan agreed. "But it's also terrifying." He leaned forward. If Uncle Terence was right about the curse following bloodlines, following emptiness, then what about her child? What about any children I might have someday? The fear had gnawed at him since Claire's announcement, that destruction hadn't ended the curse, but merely interrupted it, that it might lie dormant for a generation before finding new emptiness to fill, new desire to exploit. "Do you remember what we discussed about hypervigilance?" Dr. Harmon asked gently. "About how trauma can make us see threats in ordinary situations." Morgan nodded reluctantly. The curse was real, she acknowledged, something she'd come to accept over their months of therapy. "Your experience was real, but living in constant fear of its return is another kind of curse, one you're imposing on yourself." The observation struck home. Morgan sat back, considering her words. That evening, walking home through puddles reflecting city lights, Morgan felt a familiar sensation, a prickling awareness of being watched. He stopped, scanning the empty sidewalk, the darkened storefronts. Nothing, just rain and shadows. Yet as he continued walking, something caught his eye, a flash of green and black on the wet pavement ahead. A dollar bill, sodden and abandoned. Morgan froze, heart hammering painfully against his ribs. For a moment he swore he heard his name whispered on the rain-laden breeze. Morgan. Then rational thought reasserted itself. Just an ordinary bill. Just ordinary money, lost by some pedestrian, meaningful only in its mundane utility. With deliberate calm, Morgan knelt and picked it up. Just paper, just ink. A symbol of value, nothing more. He placed it carefully on a nearby windowsill where someone else might find it. As he turned away, continuing his journey home, Morgan felt something shift within him. A small but significant victory. The curse had taken much from him, but not everything. Not his capacity for choice. Not his slow journey toward wholeness. In his apartment, he called Claire, listening to her cheerful update about nursery colors and name possibilities. Life continuing, renewing itself, despite darkness endured. After they hung up, Morgan stood at his own window, watching the city emerge from rainfall, lights blinking on as evening deepened. He thought of his uncle's words about emptiness, about desire. "I'm filling the holes with something else now," he said aloud to the empty room. No whispers answered him. No voices called his name, just silence, just peace. Just the ordinary magic of a life reclaimed, imperfect but his own. Soft, intimate tone. "The shadows have receded. For now, thank you for journeying with me into the darkness. These stories only live when shared with souls brave enough to listen. If you felt that chill down your spine, that's your sign to join our community of shadow seekers. Subscribe now to ensure you never miss the next tale waiting in the dark. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if faced with this nightmare? Your reactions feed the stories I tell. And if you found value in tonight's offering, remember that a simple like is the coin you leave at my doorstep. Though unlike the handman's gold, this exchange brings only good fortune. Until next time, keep one eye on the shadows. They're always watching, whispered. They're always listening.